Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. In today's webinar, we are going to be talking about strategic portfolio management with Atlassian. Hopefully, you're in the right place. We're not going to wait for anybody else to come in because they can always watch the recording. These recordings are usually uploaded to YouTube later, so if you have to go early or, um, life happens, you can always come back. In addition to that, you can always contact us. You can just email our company, or there will be a LinkedIn QR code at the bottom. So if you have any questions about anything today and you don't get to ask it in the Q&A, no problem. You can just send us an email. We love talking about this stuff. All right, so strategic portfolio management with Atlassian. My name is Bryan Darr. I do not work for Atlassian, so let me explain that difference really quick. I work for a company called Valiantys. Valiantys is Atlassian's largest leading global partner. So Atlassian creates all these wonderful software products that everybody uses, and they rely on their solution partners like Valiantys to implement and help people get the most out of their tools, including training such as this webinar or implementations, migrations, customizations, custom development, all of that stuff. So we handle that. And my role at Valiantys is Global Head of Cloud, a very pretentiously named title that basically means I help people get the most out of their enterprise systems by helping them move to cloud and get the most out of Atlassian systems. So, way too much about me and this company. Let's talk about the products and how we can help with strategic portfolio management within the Atlassian ecosystem. So today we're going to talk about just strategic portfolio management in general. Let me increase this just so people can see a little better if that's going to work. Nope. All right then. Uh, there we go. All right, so we're going to do strategic portfolio management overview. We're going to talk about a bunch of in-ecosystem tools. First, the Atlassian base apps that you'll be using. So Jira Product Discovery, Jira Plans, both of which sit on top of and adjacent to Jira. And then we're going to move slightly outside of the base products to talk about solutions within Structure and Structure Gantt and Big Picture and Big Picture Enterprise. And then we're going to kind of come back into the ecosystem a little bit and talk about Jira Align. This is basically in order of complexity implementation challenges. So we're going to start with the easiest solutions first and move on to the most robust solutions, the most complex solutions later. And then we'll talk about, what's next in the ecosystem. I'll tell you a little bit more about our company. Basically, if any of the stuff we talk about today, it sounds like something you'd like help with, call us up and we'll help you. And then we'll do Q&A at the end through the Zoom Q&A widget. All right, so why do we do strategic portfolio management? We have a whole bunch of different teams working hopefully towards the same goals within our company. The problem is, how do we know that they're working towards the same goals? How do we keep everybody aligned? And how do we make sure that our portfolios are aligned to our company strategy? So we want to make sure that all of that is aligned. So that's really the primary reason we're doing this, is to make sure that all 100 to 10,000 to 100,000 vectors are pointing in the same direction, multiplying our force. To help understand that everyone's in the right position, we want to help visualize capacity versus demand. We want to be able to have clear dependency management so that we're not waiting on things that could have been resolved before, so that we're, identifying blockers. We want to have predictable and prioritized work. So is everyone working on the right thing? We want to have stakeholder and team visibility because that helps reduce the need for status meetings and, unnecessary updates. This thing could have been an email. This thing could have been a Loom video. We want to have fewer fire drills because that just decreases morale and exhausts people and eventually drives people away from your company, which ultimately hurts your business. And we want to reduce risks. So how can we identify things ahead of time? How can we centrally capture those risks? How can we share them and share the mitigations? So Atlassian solves for all of these problems, and they pretty much solve for it in the box. And then with a couple of edge cases, you can go out of the box into the marketplace or up to Jira Align, or in the most extreme cases, we will build custom integrations for, or even custom applications that run on Atlassian infrastructure in the cloud or on your infrastructure, and then support the visualization and management of your work if you have a very interesting business case for that. So let's talk about how do we implement this. I think it's important to note that up front because I think some people are just chasing a check the box solution and not always looking at implementing the right thing to get the right outcome. So it's important to remember the three pieces of people and process and tools. And I think some people think that those go either at the same time or they're an iron triangle we have to adjust. The iron triangle piece is true, but I think it's really important to note that a lot of times when people try to implement a tool, they're actually trying to fix a broken process or even I don't say broken people, but maybe the wrong people in the wrong positions. So it's really important whenever you're trying to solve for these strategic portfolio management concerns that first we have the right people in the right positions. If not, we can coach them up, coach them over into the right position. After we have the right people, and you'll know when you have the right people, you'll feel really good about coming to work and working with these people. Then we need the right processes. So I think a lot of times. Um, we're either relying on heroics or we are relying on outdated processes or no processes to get stuff done. And everything that you do should be doable analog. I mean, obviously not in a globally distributed world could you work completely analog, but I think it's really important to sit down and think about what is the most reasonable, efficient, meaningful process that we can create before we go implementing that process in a tool. If you implement the wrong process in a tool, it's just like speeding up your car as you drive off the cliff. um, and so, yeah, wrong processes, right tool, bad results. But if you don't have processes at all, we need to talk about those first before putting them into a tool. And then we bring the tool in and we use that as a backstop, as a support, as guardrails to make sure that the process is being executed appropriately. And so a lot of times too, this involves a lot of change management. It involves talking to humans, not just sending them a video and saying good luck, but working through the change with them, bringing them on board. I think we're hearing a lot about change management within this ecosystem right now, and hopefully other ecosystems as well. It's nice to see that, and to me, change management is really change enablement. It's human enablement. It's helping humans through change, um, very much in a who moved my cheese sort of way, encouraging, helping them find new work, new pride, new processes. So we got to have the right people, we got to have the right process, we got to have the right tools. When you implement this too, one of the best ways to do this is to find a small, light on the hill, excellent team that is looking for change, looking to go forward, and start with them and implement the processes there. This will tell you if it's working. This will help you find a lot of problems before you roll it out to a larger group. And this will totally lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Uh, Eventually, other people will see them. They will see their efficiency. They will see their increased motivation, their increased productivity, and then they will want to come on board too. Also, when you implement strategic portfolio items, I think it's really important to remember that we don't actually have to move everyone's specific cheese, just to quote that book again, which is one of my favorite books. Um, because every team is on their own journey and every team is at a different level of maturity. So it's really important to remember that we don't have to shake up each individual team. We want to help each team grow, but if one team's here and one team's here, having them use the exact same processes or the same tools, or the same tool configuration isn't always great. This team's going to feel like it's too slow. This team's going to feel like it's too fast. It's kind of like putting kids of varying academic abilities in the same class. So the nice thing about the Atlassian ecosystem and Jira specifically is that you can have different processes for different teams, but in the work hierarchy, it'll roll up to standardized pieces that can then be used for reporting. So to get just a little technical, at the task layer, at the story layer, you can give every team their own individual workflow. That is going to scare some Jira admins to hear, and I would definitely agree that there are some administrative overhead considerations to that. Um, Standardization is good, but not just for the sake of standardization. What's the intended outcome there? And what you can do is at the epic layer, or at the safe feature layer, at the next layer up, at the program layer, you can standardize that. You can have all the required reporting fields at that layer. And then you'll know that everything's getting reported appropriately. And all of that will roll up to standardized initiatives and to the goals platform within Atlassian and um, the project reporting platform. But you can let your teams work the way they need to work. And then you can modify the tool as your team grows and matures, which I think is a really big selling point of this tool. It does require a little bit of extra administrative work. And I do recognize that at companies of 100,000 people or even more, um, you do need to start standardizing in some ways. But I think if you scare people out of the tool, they're going to go do shadow IT, and then you're going to lose your metrics anyway. So we have to be ready to work with people. Also, whenever we implement this stuff, some of the change management has to do at the leadership level. Are they ready for a change? Whenever companies go through big T transformations, there's usually a groundswell that's then met by a leadership understanding, and then they meet in the middle, and then they make that change. But um, but for little changes, there's a groundswell, maybe at the team level, maybe at the program level, but they're going to have leadership buy-in because otherwise we're using too much social capital to pull people laterally into new processes. Unless you have an incredibly charismatic, contributor somewhere in the company, it's usually very hard without executive leadership to get anybody aligned. So we have to make sure that we have leadership buy-in. All right, so now let's dive more into the processes and the tools. And I promise you, we're going to look at live tool demos and hopefully they go right because live demoing is always a little scary. So let's talk about specifically intake management, work management, and portfolio management, which are kind of the three major pieces of all of this. So for intake management, within the Atlassian ecosystem, the best front end and organizational tools are Jira Product Discovery and Jira Service Management. Each of those tools has a different purpose, but they interact very well. And I actually have a visual hiding off screen that I should have had preloaded. So I'm gonna bring that in a moment. But basically, we're gonna use Jira Product Discovery, and that is going to be your prioritization tool. It's going to be what you use to handle intake processes. Jira Service Management is going to be the front door that people are going to knock on when they need to submit an idea. And I think I'm rambling here. I apologize. Jira Service Management is a service management tool. And in most companies, people are already using the Jira Service Management portal to submit IT requests, HR requests, etc. So that's already kind of your front door. And so whenever somebody submits an idea, they don't necessarily know if that idea really is a feature request, or if it's a bug, or if it's a problem, or if it's a potential solution. And so you want people to go to that common front door, and then people will triage it on the back end. And if it is a real idea, something that needs to land within the portfolio hierarchy, within your portfolio pipeline, then you put it into Jira Product Discovery. And Jira Product Discovery is an amazing tool. It's the fastest growing tool from Atlassian. And it allows you to, on many different axes, identify the work that you're going to do and prioritize that work and put it in your team's backlogs. I found that visual here. So let me show you what this looks like. So basically, Jira Service Management is your front door. Somebody submits a new thing. That thing gets triaged. If it's not an idea, if it's not potential project work, it moves into the appropriate, service management team's queue. Is it an IT request? Is it a bug that needs to be resolved? Is it a, whatever? Is it an HR request? If it is an idea that could potentially change the company, change the business, well, then you land it in Jira Product Discovery. And Jira Product Discovery holds that workflow. So we would then run it through some review steps, business case steps. We would bring in all of that data. We would bring in customer insights if necessary. Atlassian just acquired a company called Cycle, which is an AI platform for bringing in customer insights. So that's getting added to Jira Product Discovery. The project will get initial approval usually, and at that point, we may need some additional discovery from our technical teams. At that point, we create technical work down in Jira. That goes into the team's backlogs. The teams track that work, which is great because we're not flooding their backlog with all of these potential ideas. Those are staying over in the product management side of things. And that information feeds back into JPD. And then once we understand what it is and what the effort is and what the intended outcome is, we can then prioritize it according to our own company's prioritization needs, whether that's way to shortest job first or if it's RICE. There's a lot of prioritization frameworks out there. You can build your own custom ones. Once we have that prioritized, well, we still don't know if we're ready to do it yet because priorities are always circumstantial. Just as an example, in a personal case, my priority at 10 o'clock in the morning is very different than my priority at 5 o'clock at night. And company priorities can change almost as fast, if there's a big ecosystem change, whatever. So so pri prioritization is a continuous activity. But once we understand that this is probably the next thing we're going to work on, we can start putting it on a roadmap, communicating that to our stakeholders. Once it's on a roadmap, our teams can start planning work, tracking their work, completing their work, and then that feeds back into Jira Product Discovery. And what's nice is if you're, catching where I'm going here, your stakeholders don't have to get down into the weeds in Jira. They don't have to see the individual stories and tasks being done by your teams. They can stay at this, idea project level and see it in a way that's meaningful for them. So that's the portfolio hierarchy and Jira Product Discovery piece that really is going to handle intake management. So let me go hop into that tool now and show you what that looks like. So we're going to use Jira Product Discovery. Really quick, let me just tell you about the architecture. So in Jira Product Discovery, you have items that are called ideas, and they have associated insights. And an insight is just something that attaches to an idea. It can be a customer insight from a customer interview or from surveys that you've taken or, people doing research out in the wild. And you can then view those ideas in many different ways. There's basically four different views you can create. One is a list, one is a board with columns, kind of like a Kanban board. Another is a matrix view where you can compare multiple axes of measurement, and the other is a traditional timeline view. You can then use calculated fields for prioritization, and you can then link those ideas to delivery like we saw in that diagram earlier. So let me show you what this actually looks like. So this is Jira. This is a live instance of Jira. And I mean, it's a demo instance. And if I come to projects, I'm going to come to my Jira Product Discovery project. And we can see here under my intake, I guess folder you'd call it, I've got a couple of different views. So I've got my new ideas view. And this is incredibly simple, right? This is just showing our ideas, the reporter, and the assignee. But I can bring in as many other fields as I want. So I can bring in the creator field, which is slightly different than the reporter. I can bring in an effort field, and I can measure effort here. I can bring in many different fields. This is much more like a spreadsheet and therefore highly flexible. You can make new fields in this product as easily as you can make a new column in Excel. And then if I click into one of these ideas, I get all of the information about that idea. So I get the overview, all of the fields that matter for prioritizing this view, defining what this idea is. I can add a description, and this is Atlassian's classic wiki style editing box. I can add in multimedia and smart links and live spreadsheets in here. I can link entire Confluence pages and display them in line here. I can make comments on this. I can attach customer insights to this. So and I can use a Chrome extension so I can go snag ideas out in the wild connected to this idea. So the whole point of this tool is defining what is the right thing we're working on in the first place before our teams start working on it and before we start managing it within our plans and our roadmaps. Let me skip ahead a little bit. So after intake and after our initial review, where we give it a rough effort and a rough impact measurement, we then come into our post-intake section, and all this is totally customizable, so it can be done to whatever your process is. We would then run it through discovery. It would then land in a team backlog. And at some point, we're going to want our stakeholders to see where we are. So here, oh gosh, this isn't configured. I apologize. So here I would do, let's say, a now, next, later roadmap status. There we go. So here I would make a now, next, later roadmap, which Atlassian calls an honest roadmap. It's so much more honest than trying to guess at delivery times before your delivery teams have given you enough feedback. So we could say, you know what, these are the ideas that we're going to do right now. And as soon as we're done with these, as soon as we have capacity, we're going to do these things next. And we're still fleshing out everything in later. And as long as you're consistent in the reporting of this to your stakeholders, it really reduces a lot of the noise. And your stakeholders get less anxious because they can trust this view. And they know that, improving the editor is coming up next. Once you start delivering, that's when you actually start to really understand, particularly in a software world. I'm very frustrated that this got redone. So let me see if I can find a different timeline. There we go. Once you start delivering, you can start then putting things on an actual rough dated roadmap. So you can really narrow in and you can start aligning your marketing teams, for a product launch or for informing everybody. So all of this is happening at the idea level within the Atlassian ecosystem. We haven't even touched delivery yet. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I'm sorry, in the Q&A section. But that's the first major piece. It's intake and prioritization and deciding, are we working on the right thing? I don't know if I'm doing Jira Product Discovery a great service right now. It is an incredibly flexible tool. You'd be amazed at what you can build with it and how easy it is to change it based on your company's needs. And you can build some really compelling roadmaps for your stakeholders. You can also filter everything down per stakeholder, give each stakeholder a view. You can publish those views internally for any logged in user to see, or you can restrict those views. And so we're now keeping people out of Jira, out of the weeds. I cannot tell you how wonderful this is for developer productivity, for the product managers, for the stakeholders. Everybody wins in this situation. And we can even add things like milestones on the roadmap, to talk about other external major events that will reflect our roadmap. This is one of the fastest growing products within the Atlassian ecosystem. One of the most fun to help companies implement too, by the way, because you really get to sit down and figure out how do you prioritize? We recently created a full day. We thought it was going to be a half day. Turns out it's a whole day to teach this product. And the curriculum gets into, creating custom prioritization fields and all of that fun stuff. Here, just to show you as well, this is an example of prioritization where we're using the weighted shortest job first framework, and then we have different prioritization aspects. I think I'm just trying to wow you too much with a visual. Just hopefully you can trust that this is a very helpful tool. All right. So after we do intake, we then have, if I come back to this visual, we now have our planned work over in Jira. And this is where we're going to move over to Atlassian Plans, which is a cross-team, cross-project planning and road mapping tool. And it's more for the development side of the house. So this is just a quick screenshot of plans. Um, we have all of the team's work, important details about that work, and then we're planning that work across sprints, across quarters, etc. And then all of this relates back to those ideas that were approved and are being watched by stakeholders on those idea roadmaps. So let me show you what plans looks like in the tool. Plans has its own section, and I've got a plans demo here for you. And in plans, much like Jira Product Discovery, you can create different views based on who needs to see what. And again, this is the more technical side of the house. We don't want our business owners necessarily looking at these pieces because your team's backlogs are going to have they're going to have, non-functional enablers. They're going to have architectural and security updates, and they're going to have all this other stuff that you don't really want your stakeholders to be looking at. And you don't want them questioning the prioritization of that, right? Like, how can you prioritize a new feature versus a security update? They're both very important things. And so it just comes down to capacity. So we need to be prioritizing the new features over here. We need to be prioritizing security updates over here. And then it's up to the teams and the product owners to blend those in the backlog based on team's capacity. So we do that in plans. Plans used to be called portfolio for Jira. Then it was called advanced roadmaps. Then they realized they wanted to use the roadmap term in JPD, so they pulled it out and put it over in JPD, and now it's called plans, which I think is probably like hopefully the final name of this product. But it is a great product. It is just a different way to visualize work in Jira. Um, and it's the only way where you can see cross-project work in Jira in one place. I did just see a question in the chat about the WSJF prioritization. Does it perform the formula calculation? Yes, Jira Product Discovery. You can build custom number formulas, custom calculation formulas, and yeah, it's a you can build any and pretty much any sort of mathematical formula you want based on the fields that you create. So diving into plans, and then I'll answer David your question in a moment. So when I'm in plans, basically plans starts in the back end with settings, and I take in where is it? They keep changing this view. Details. I'm looking for work in your plan. There we go. This is a new view. So basically, you update your plan scope, and you can bring in boards, you can bring in projects, or you can bring in filters. Basically, a project is a filter. It's just scope to a project. The reason you'd bring in a board is because if you need to bring in team sprints, the sprint data is attached to a board, so you bring that into plans. And so each plan has its own defined scope. And if I come back out here, and then from that scope, all of your work starts stacking up in here. And you can basically add whatever fields you want within reason. So your question, David, basically you would come here, you would add fields. If you don't see a field here, type in that field name first. If you don't see that, you then have to go into plan settings. My guess is this is an architectural choice. You have to choose custom fields on the back end. And then we have, fields added to the timeline. Oh, wow, yeah, they really are updating this a lot recently. As you can see down here, settings have a new look. And then you can add a Jira field, a JPD field, most fields. I want to say that there's certain JPD fields that you can't bring in. I want to say like local calculation formulas. I'd have to check the JPD curriculum for that, but basically you can bring in most Jira fields. There are a couple of unsupported fields. That includes that field's actually in there, so I'm not sure why it doesn't say that. Things like cascading select fields I think aren't supported. And there's another couple fields like the JSM satisfaction score, etc. But for the most part, if there's a field in Jira, you can bring it in. And so you build these different views. based on the fields you want to see. And then you can adjust this view so you can sort by certain aspects. You can group by certain aspects. But again, this is for the teams to figure out. Um, and once you have a view, you can then come in and you can save that view, and then you can share that view internally. So that we're all, singing from the same music sheet, as it were. This looks like a big spreadsheet. And it is a live updatable spreadsheet, which is quite helpful. So I can add my scientific guess in here for sizing. I can add story points. I can add business value, time criticality, etc. Let me show you a different save view now. And this is our epic planning view. So now we're bringing in the Wischief score, a swag story points. We're bringing in things that are blocked and is blocked by. And each view has two different aspects, a list and a timeline. In this timeline, I have shoved in a lot of extra fields. So let me just collapse all those fields at once. And now we can see the real magic of plans. We can see our spaghetti string dependency map timeline. So here I I made this view so that I can plan epics and I can break down those epics here and I can see them on a timeline and then I can see dependency strings uh, which will basically help me plan things appropriately. I can also roll up to a higher level. Let's say that I have initiatives that are work items. So I've got these initiatives, and now I can break these initiatives down into their constituent epics. And I can break those epics down into tasks if I want to. But in this view, because I'm, talking to executives and showing initiatives, I actually don't want to show the task view in here. So I've actually chosen to hide that in the filter. I've chosen to only show initiative down to epic and not initiative down to task. And then I could switch and I can collapse these and I can show all of my initiatives on a timeline here. But again, now that Jira Product Discovery is in the mix, a lot of what people used to put in plans is getting pulled out over there into this honest road mapping world where we are avoiding putting dates on things as long as possible because dates are usually just regrets in the future. Um, and switching to that now, next, later, honest roadmap Kanban style over there, while keeping teams able in plans to really plan their work and their dependencies, I think is helping a lot of people work much more efficiently. In addition to all of these views you can make here, you can also do capacity planning within Teams. And let me just reset this to, there we go. So I've got Team Alpha. God, there we go. I think I have to go to the time. There we go. All right. So Plans is the only native tool that you can use without getting an add-on to do capacity planning within Jira. And the way it works is you use plans, you basically make a special view that is grouped by team or grouped by sprint. And you then come in here and you choose to show capacity on timeline. And capacity requires a couple of inputs. You have to have sprints or time boxes like weeks. You have to have estimates on your work items. You have to have a capacity per sprint. And if I click into the sprint, we can see that this sprint is associated with a certain team, which is Team Alpha. It has a capacity of 30 story points. I can change that on a per sprint basis, or I can update that team's overall velocity and it'll set, future velocity going forward. And so as I put work items into a sprint, we can see this little bar move up or down. So for example, if I change alpha 50 down here, if I move it into sprint 1, we will see those two change. And if I move a couple more into sprint 1, at some point I can make it go red. Or here, even better, let's just say I give it a much higher estimate, and then that really shoots through the roof, and now I know that I am over allocated and I need to fix that. I can also see all of my dependencies mapped here too. I was going to say something about this. Oh, this is team level capacity. So Atlassian's all about teams. It's all about stable teams. If you're wanting to do individual capacity, you're going to need to use a marketplace add-on such as Structure and Structure Gantt or Big Picture and Big Picture Enterprise. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But if you're doing team level capacity, because again, each team has a velocity and we assign this work to a team sprint, and therefore it'll start showing us what's going on in here. If you're doing team level capacity, this is a great out of the box way to do it. Plans is included in Jira Premium and Jira Enterprise. So pretty much most companies are already using that layer of product. So it's already included. In addition to planning at the team level, at the sprint level, you can also plan across teams. And for that, we have a program board. And this is kind of a strange view to look at first, but basically what you have is you have sprints or work increments in columns, and then you have teams in rows. And so here I've got Team Beta's work, and if I move this work up to Team Alpha, so I basically just change the team that's going to work on that work item. And I can also see that I've got a scheduling problem. Team Alpha is planning on doing this work item in sprint 3. I'm going to start this item in sprint 1. I've got a problem. So I now need to either go have a conversation with Team Alpha and say, hey, can you move this up? Or I need to move mine out. And then that dependency line resolves itself. Oh, ow, and this is a new feature. They don't even go gray, they just disappear. How nice. So it really cleans up the whole spaghetti problem in here. And then you have all of your unscheduled work out here. So if you're doing cross-team planning, for example, if you're doing big room planning, quarterly or monthly, this is a good way to do that. We could also have a coffee talk moment where we discuss is big room quarterly planning dead and our business is moving faster than quarters now and should we be doing monthly planning? That's a fun conversation to have. In addition to this view, there's a calendar view. I don't find calendars as useful within plans only because we're looking at a layer where everything goes across so many days and weeks. But if you scope it down to a Teams view and show work on a calendar, that's okay. This is probably better for Kanban teams than Scrum teams because Scrum teams, the dates of the work are just inherited by the sprint dates. So actually, if I was to show you, like here, look at Alpha 4, Alpha Sprint 4, it's going to show up over here in this sprint. If I go to the list view, and if I bring in the start date and the end date. Um, oh, I'm actually not sure which date we're using here, but you can see that these should be inherited by sprints. Well, it's not configured to show you that in this. I apologize. Oh, I think we're using, yeah, there we go. We're using target start and target end. This is also just a really good example of what you have to be careful about when you configure these tools is you can use multiple dates. Our current recommendation is to use start date and due date because that's what the timeline uses in the projects. I know I'm getting kind of technical for that, but let me know if you have any questions about that later. But here we can see that on Alpha 4, because it's in Sprint 4, it's inheriting Sprint 4's dates. Sprint 4 starts on October 17th, it ends on October 30th. I see this little S that's telling me it's using sprint dates. I could plan this date manually if I wanted to, in which case then the calendar view probably becomes more helpful because otherwise I'm just going to see all of this work just spread across multiple weeks and the calendar just isn't gonna seem super helpful. The other piece that I love in plans is this dependency map. This is not critical path, but it does show you all of your dependencies and how they layer and how they cross teams. Oops. And so, for example, I can group by team. And if I zoom out, Control Shift Alt, if I zoom out, there we go. I can see down here, for example, that Team Alpha has a lot of work that is really dependent on Team Charlie. So maybe that's my platform team, but they have a blocker for Team Charlie before all that work gets done over here. So I need to make sure that I'm sequencing this accordingly. So this really allows me to have this kind of bird's eye view of all our dependencies. Okay, let me look at a couple questions because all of this relates to each other. What happens if you have a Kanban team and a Scrum team? Is there any way to view that together? That gets messy. There are ways to view that together. One way is to use an automation in the background that either, updates story points to some sort of other value that you show, or to like an estimate value, or the other way around. Usually we just sit down with your data like just for a couple hours, and we just figure out if we need to do those automations in the background, or if you're happy just not seeing Kanban estimates in your plan. The two marketplace products for individual capacity planning, those are Structure plus Structure Gantt and Big Picture plus Big Picture Enterprise. I'm actually going to show those in a minute, so we'll get to that in a second. Natalia, in the timeline, you're saying that no other dates besides start and end dates will show. No, the the date problem in Atlassian right now is it's kind of interesting. So if I go into like a team project, Um, this timeline here that's just in the project view? This timeline only works on start date and due date. There is currently no configuration. So if I go to board settings here, there's no um, there's no date setting for this timeline. It's hard coded to start date and due date. What's interesting is if you go to a Jira Service Management project, let's see, like IT Service Desk. If you come in here and you go to Views, and this board, if it loads, configure views, there we go. There is a setting for date fields. So this is possible. They just haven't done it on regular software and business projects yet. I did speak with a product owner at Team 25 in Anaheim, and um, they were interested in this use case. In my opinion, start date is too vague. Like it's not target start, it's not actual start, it just says start date. And due date is too specific. Like due date usually implies that this is the absolute must-have date, as opposed to the targeted planned date that we're going to finish it by, which could be different. And even in plans, if you have due date and start to, and like a different end date within the same plan, it'll flag if the due date, I'm sorry, if the planned end date is past the due date. So those even interact within plans. Um, so uh, right now, because the team view is, if they stumble on timeline, which you can't globally turn off in their project, and they start putting dates on here, and then you're looking at a plan of the same work, but you're using a different date field, that will cause confusion. So that's why right now we're recommending just use start date and due date, although you could use other dates in plans to plan everything. Um, I realize that's all getting in the weeds, and I know this webinar is supposed to be about strategic portfolio management. Obviously, when we help implement this with customers, we're really talking more at a higher level about ROI than anything else. But in order to have that, you do have to have a solid technical foundation. All right, so that's plans, which is already built in and does team level capacity, and dependency mapping and all of that fun stuff. We also have a question while we're here about team management. Is there a way to automate the edit of the field of work items? For example, can you automatically assign work in project X to a certain team. Yes, you would do that with automation. You basically set up an automation rule that would say anytime a work item is created or moved into a project, that the team field updates. And that is a challenge because when you're viewing team capacity, it really relies on the team field within plans. So yeah, automatically setting that is quite helpful. As far as governance goes, governance is one of our favorite topics. Um, so for the governance of teams, Atlassian recently this year announced the idea of managed teams, where you can sync a team's membership to groups within Jira, within your Active Directory, within your user management system. And so you can control team membership that way centrally. And I'm not sure if I know there's a feature request out there. I believe it's being actively worked on. I don't remember if they finished it or not yet, where the ability to create a team would be restricted. I don't think that they've rolled that out yet. So right now it's still a bit of a free-for-all, I think, but you can at least start managing teams. And they recently updated the ability to rename a managed team once it's connected to a group. Um, but yeah, governance, there's a lot of governance stuff that needs to happen in most people's Atlassian instances. There's a lot of opportunity for reducing administrative overhead through things like, creating a small governance committee to outsource the responsibility. Like if you're the admin, you don't want to be the only person saying no. But you definitely want people on this committee that have an eye for how people work and how the company intends to work, so that when you have requests for new fields and new processes, that they go through the right sort of lens. Um, yeah, there's a lot of little things there, and then there's a lot of big architectural things like, are we going to use JPD to do our intake? And how are we going to communicate with our stakeholders? And how are we going to do the front end of our intake? What does our front end portal look like? How can we speed up intake and prioritization by having a unified internal portal through JSM? Um, so yeah. So right now, Vanessa, teams governance, I would say if you can do the managed teams for the teams that matter for your planning, and just kind of ignore the other teams for now until Atlassian allows the restriction of those teams, that would be your answer for now. Also happy to hop on a call later on to talk about this more because I realize a lot of this is nuanced. It's actually really hard to give blanket answers for a lot of things on webinars like this because everybody's company is different. Everyone's problems are similar, but the way that we solve them varies from company to company. Oh, one more thing that I forgot to talk about, which is really Plan's sort of amazing secret weapon, is that all the changes that I make here, changing sprint to sprint, this is all saved here, and it hasn't been pushed back to Jira to everybody in Jira yet. When I'm ready, I can push all those changes back, and I can see changes that Vicky made earlier and changes that I made, and I can even revert all these changes if we don't like the plan, and I can choose just to push mine and leave Vicky's unaffected, or show me just the ones today. Or I can even come in and I can say, actually, I just want to push these two changes for now. So I can select those and say oops, only push the changes selected on the timeline for now. So this allows you to do your planning without affecting the team's backlogs yet, which I think is very important. All right, so we talked about intake, we talked about, in product planning. The other two products out there are Structure and Structure Gantt. I say these both because at least the last time I checked, and the last time that I implemented this, you actually need both in order to get the Gantt chart to show up. So you're basically buying two apps. And what this looks like is, I've got a demo of that in here. So if I come to apps, and structure. And structure is a lovely tool, by the way. It looks similar to plans, right? We've got our work breakdown structure over here on the left, but then on the right, we have an actual Gantt. What I didn't emphasize before in plans is that plans is not a Gantt. Plans is just showing dates on a timeline. It really is for team planning it's more aimed at an agile world. You can use it in a waterfall world. However, things like, pushing one date out and having the next date push out, that doesn't work in plans. It does work here in structure Gantt because structure Gantt is a Gantt chart. And there's a couple of really compelling features within Structure. One of them is that I can turn on the resourcing module, and I can do, and there's a couple of me in here, you can see from testing, I can do actual resource capacity management for a work item. So I can see that probably one of these two work items or a child is assigned to me at 8 story points for this chunk. And here in Structure, because it's a Gantt, and Gantts are all about timelines and actual time, we can come into settings and I gotta remember where this setting is. I want to see scheduling. Yeah. Um, Look at this, terrifying setting that we have to be careful of. The hours ratio, how many hours in one story point? This will have your agilists up with pitchforks and torches. Um, Hopefully we can all come to an agreement that, you know, story points are fine at a team level, but as we get out to a program level or to a portfolio level, we need to see actual time. That being said, are those estimates ever really accurate in the aggregate? Who knows? So it really depends on your portfolio and how you want to plan. And again, with Jira Product Discovery in the mix, if you're doing, agile work, little a agile, maybe not, die hard agile, and you're doing honest road mapping, maybe you can move away from the roll-ups. But yeah, we can do progress calculation. We can do manual scheduling instead. There is so much within this configuration you can do. And then you add in this concept of slices in Structure, where I can add a slice based on JQL, and I can say, okay, well, actually, for just this subset of work, behave in a different way. So color in a different way, do the story points to hours conversion in a different way. So you can get really granular here. And within Structure, you can do team level capacity planning as well as individual capacity planning. Um, I think for a lot of groups, the individual level capacity planning is a real challenge just because it's so much overhead. But if that's your need, that's your need. And we help a lot of teams implement this also with tempo. If they're doing time tracking and they need to do budgeting around time tracking and cost allocations through time tracking, that's another tool that really comes into play with this. It's Jira time tracking on steroids plus some. So yeah, if you need an actual Gantt, Structure plus Structure Gantt, that is you're going to be your go-to, or Big Picture and Big Picture Enterprise. Big Picture works a little bit differently as well. Big Picture, one of its great things is that it can do individual capacity planning as well, and it can also do um, So basically, big picture, you create these portfolios. I've got a demo portfolio in here. And I mean, I'm really not doing the service within the last couple of minutes that I have, but it's similar. But when I jump into a work item, um, when I'm using big picture, we can also do individual skilling. So I can come to this work item and I can say, what skills does this work item require? It needs a developer skill. And then I can find the perfect match, and I can have given developers or certain employees certain skills, and then it'll match them to this, and it'll look at their capacity, and it'll see if they have the skill. It'll look at the dates associated with this particular work item. It'll see if they have the capacity within that area. And so if your company is that kind of company where everything is very tightly planned, big picture may be more of what you need. Let me just talk about some of the caveats between structure and big picture. So talking about structure, slices allow for very granular behavior. Structures themselves are pretty useful if you just want to create, these sort of like ad hoc work breakdown structures. You can do team and individual resourcing. You can't do skills. You can do multiple baselines on your Gantt, because again, it's a Gantt. Um, you can do duration based on estimates, which is pretty cool. Uh, Last time I checked, there's no sandboxing like plans, and so some of the changes you make are live changes within Jira, which I'm not as much of a fan of. And structure is great also for sharing visualizations, just like plans. Oh my gosh, I didn't even show the visualization sharing in plans. It's pretty amazing. If you come here, let's say to a timeline and click share, um, you can you can just share a read-only view if you want to. You can also export a PNG and drop it into a PowerPoint. You can drop it in an iframe, you can drop it in a Confluence page and add some more context around it. So, sharing visualizations within plans is great. Also within JPD is great, and also within structure is great. Big picture and big picture enterprise. Again, most people will need both if they're doing large scale configuration. This actually adds a lot more. You can see a big Gantt chart, but you also get program boards. You get a risk module. The deciding factors in here, there's many tools in one within Big Picture and Big Picture Enterprise. I'm really glossing over these because this really requires kind of an in-depth understanding of what you need in your company before you decide on one tool. You can do cross-plan resource views, you can do skilling, you can do resource leveling, but visualization sharing requires yet another add-on. In the short amount of time I have, I want to talk about two other important tools within the ecosystem. One is Jira Align. Jira Align is Atlassian's flagship strategic portfolio management tool. It's huge, it's big, it requires a lot of configuration, but if you are massively at scale, Jira Align is probably where you want to go. We have a whole different webinar that really dives deep into Jira Align, so I'm not going to do it here. And I'll show you the other webinars later on. The one other thing that I wanted to show you is when you're doing strategy, um, there's a goal function within the Atlassian ecosystem that you can tie work to, which is really important. And let me see if, yeah, here we go. So within the Atlassian ecosystem, you have goals that can break down into sub-goals that break down into sub-goals. And each of these will prompt you to update it once a month. And then you can tie your Jira work to those goals. So also we can move our goals out of plans and out of our roadmaps and out of JPD as well. And we can really roll this up to company strategy. And when we update those goals, we can do check-ins, metrics. We can say we're 60% of the way, or we've raised another $10 million, or we've increased efficiency by 5%, or NPS scores by 5%. So that this is maybe the view that your executive leadership team wants, whereas the work that's being done is more what your teams need to see for the planning and where the teams bump into each other. There's so much to talk about. An hour is not enough time. Let me scroll to the bottom. First of all, if you want to talk about any more of this, please feel free to find me on LinkedIn or send me an email, brian.darr@valiantys.com. And we have a lot of upcoming free and paid classes. So today's was our strategic portfolio management with Atlassian. This is free. And anything that says sign up is free. And if you go to valiantys-training.com, which I think Kristen's dropping in the chat. Thank you so much, Kristen. You can see all of these. Basically you'll just go there, and then if you land and click on show more, you'll see all of the upcoming webinars and events. So we have a cloud migration workshop if you're on data center and looking to move to cloud. There's a lot of functionality on cloud that gets unlocked when you move there. We have a governance webinar. So for the person earlier that was asking about governance, we have Atlassian AI webinar. We have an introduction to Confluence. And then we have a couple of paid classes. Jira Bootcamp. This is a super intensive 3-day administrative bootcamp where you learn how to set up Jira, configure Jira. For software developers, we also teach an Angular bootcamp. If you're using Atlassian Analytics, we have a quick start paid class for that. If you're a developer and want to develop on the Atlassian platform, we have a Forge bootcamp. If you are building service management service desk, we have a Jira Service Management Bootcamp. But then we also have a free webinar, Jira Service Management Fundamentals, coming up on October 16th. And that then rolls into another free webinar, Jira Service Management for ITSM, because the ITSM features of JSM are so much more than the base product. So we actually split those out into two different webinars and a lot of other stuff too. So yeah, a lot to sign up for. Please sign up for these if you want. Please reach out and contact me if you have any questions. We have a load of YouTube content. And again, if anything in this webinar sounded like, wow, I'd really like somebody like Bryan or someone he knows to come help us out with this. Our company is 100% dedicated to the Atlassian ecosystem. And we help people do implementations, customizations, custom development work. We do a lot of training, a lot of user enablement. So, yeah, if you have any questions, let us know. But I really appreciate your kind attention. An hour is a lot to ask of people in this day and age. And so thank you for sticking around. And if you have any questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes. But otherwise, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Hope you found this valuable.